Hi, everyone. It's Rob, and thanks for listening in today. I greatly appreciate your time. I want to express my deep gratitude for all of your support and gratitude to my friends Ashish and Jimpa, as well as the team here at Image One for helping to make leading with genuine care a real difference maker in this world. Quick note, if you haven't added your name to our email list, please do at donothingbook.com. If you're a regular listener, you know we have had many important conversations with some amazing people. If you're inspired, please share the podcast with your friends, coworkers, and people in your network. Okay, I'm so excited for our guest today, Dr. Jim Loehr. Dr. Loehr is a world-renowned performance psychologist whose groundbreaking science-based energy management training system has achieved literally worldwide recognition. In 1992, Jim started a business with his longtime friend who possessed a doctorate in bioengineering. Together, they formed a company called the Human Performance Institute, which became a living lab of high performance. And to date, nearly 400,000 clients have gone through the programs offered by the Institute. Clients include, get this, 17 number one in the world in their sports: military special forces, FBI anti-terrorist teams, physicians and surgeons from nearly every specialty, and business executives from throughout the world. Johnson & Johnson purchased the Institute in 2008, and Jim remained with the company for another 6 years. Now, Jim has authored 17 books, and he's a New York Times best-selling author. According to Jim, his two most important accomplishments were his breakthroughs in energy management and his pioneering work in linking character strengths to sustained high performance. And Jim is currently applying his insights to youth development. The new company is called the Youth Performance Institute. Very important work. From his more than 30 years of experience in applied research, Jim believes the most important factor in successful achievement, personal fulfillment, and life satisfaction is the strength of one's character. He's come to understand that character strength can be built through energy investment. And his latest book is entitled Leading with Character: 10 Minutes a Day to a Brilliant Legacy. I highly recommend the book, and the accompanying journal exercises. Very powerful. Okay, so please enjoy my chat with Dr. Jim Loehr. Jim, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be with you, and I hope we can create some value for your audience.
I think we will. I'm very confident in that. I'd actually like to start by sharing a quote from you, from your book, Leading with Character. It goes like this, quote, "For each person whose life you touched, your legacy was not about your money, but your kindness, not about your prominence or even fame, but your integrity, not about your intelligence, but about your caring and respect," unquote. I really enjoy that. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what that means to you.
You know, I think you picked up probably the most important theme in the entire book, and it is about the preeminence of how we treat other people in actually living a successful life and having a life that we really feel good about what we did when we were here. It took a long time. I'm a psychologist, and nothing in my training kind of brought me to that conclusion. But we had this living laboratory at the Human Performance Institute, and probably to date, some 400,000 people went through that program, high performers. And we're research crazy. We collect so much data, and we looked at longitudinal data on the things that actually sustain people through good times and bad times, and what enabled them to rise above, you know, all the stress and angst and everything else, and endure and find a way to really feel like they left something behind that was noble. And what that led us to was this remarkable conclusion that our treatment of others, our moral and ethical character, has no equal. And for me, that was an insight that I'm sorry it took so long. I wish I had that insight earlier in my life, but it took a long way, and it was led by data, not just by, some feel-good feelings, but it was really an interesting journey, an evolutionary journey. And I think it's the most significant part of who we are, is we are connected. We're relational human beings. And our ancestors survived because they relied on each other. And if they didn't have trust, if they didn't have respect, if they didn't care and really find ways to reach out to others in a helpful way, when their turn came, there was no one there. And those who got cast out into the wilderness by themselves were the first to go. They never made it. So connecting to others is probably the most important mission we're on, and to do it in a very respectful and in a way that we recognize that it really isn't about ourselves. It's about us. It's what we can do for others.
Mm-hmm. Us meaning all of us together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you touched on a lot of things in that statement that I'm going to ask you about. And I want to start with stress, anxiety, and burnout. You shared a study from Harvard Medical School that found that 96% of senior leaders reported feeling burnt out, 1/3 describing it as extreme. And now I'm reading, it's not just senior leaders, it's all people. It's stress, anxiety, fatigue with our current pandemic, the situation that's going on. It's just weighing heavily. And I'm wondering your thoughts on what's going on out there, and then how can we work with these feelings?
This pandemic has pushed just about everyone to limits they've never known before. This is something most of us have never even thought would ever happen, certainly in America. But worldwide, I have good friends all over the world, and I get the same thing from them. It has really put under siege almost everything we hold valuable: our health, our families, our well-being, our ability to make, ends meet and to put food on the table. And we have found ourselves in isolation. We don't have the normal contacts that we would have in a customary week, or even with family members. We have to, even wearing masks and quarantines and everything else. So I spent a lot of my life as a performance psychologist looking at the arena of stress. I wrote a whole book about this. It's called Stress for Success. And what I came to understand when we really got into the center of this is that stress exposure is not the bad guy. We learned that the hormones of stress are the hormones of life. If I take stress out of your life, you will go away. You cannot survive. If I put your arm in a cast, even though you broke a bone in your arm, the muscles that are completely protected from stress begin to atrophy immediately. And if you don't introduce stress back into that at a certain point, you're going to lose those muscles. And the same thing is true with us. We may think that if we could live in a stress-free world, we would be happiest, but the fact is not true. And it's certainly evident in retirement communities where people have removed all stress in their life and they begin to deteriorate very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So be careful what you wish for. So there is stress, however, that exceeds our limits. And for just about everyone, that's probably been happening. If you look back on your life, the things that have pushed you the most have actually helped you the most to grow ultimately if you got through them. So in a way, storms are a gift. If you understand, don't cuss the storm, but understand this requires adaptation. It requires adjustments. It requires a new worldview. It requires a new way of doing things. And if you get through this, you will be confident and more prepared for tomorrow's storm. And there will be other storms, other pandemics that may not take the same form, but we're going to be better prepared. So I will tell you what the culprit is. If you're in a high stress environment, which we have been, the most important imperative is that you seek equivalent recovery and healing. That all stress becomes excessive. You just take a very tiny weight and start lifting it with your right or left arm. Even though you go, I can do this all day, you can't do it all day. Eventually, it will cause serious damage. And you have to rest and recover, and then you can do it again. And eventually be able to lift really heavy weights. But it was the presence of recovery that balanced the forces of stress. So stress, floods the system with what we call these hypothalamic pituitary adrenal cortical hormones, one of the principal ones being cortisol. And they spawn all kinds of reactions in the body, in the brain, in the muscular system, breathing, all the various systems. And when that hyper, active state occurs, what is required is a state of healing and restoration and renewal. So if you're in high stress, you have to find ways to find recovery physically, emotionally, mentally, and most importantly, spiritually. And it will not be, if you break, it will not be because, normally it was the stress that got you. It was the culprit was insufficient recovery and understanding how you must balance it. You have to turn those systems off and let them renew. Now, we've learned a lot in war where we have this thing we call post-traumatic stress syndrome. And we've had a lot of people at our institute, former vets, who suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome. And when that happens, like if you break your arm, you kind of have to put yourself in a cast and protect those bones from stress almost completely. But then eventually you have to bring it out. And anyone suffering from really serious stress probably has to be protected from stress for a while and then gradually introduced. And eventually you get what we refer to as post-traumatic stress growth, where you actually grew in extraordinary ways after the healing occurred. And now you have more confidence than you ever had that you got through that, you can handle anything. So stress is not the bad guy we always tend to think it is. The culprit is normally insufficient recovery and restoration.
Mm. So when you have that growth, say in the example of the arm, can it be stronger, or is it just part of the process?
No, it's, you can take if you need to have, let's say metaphorically, you need to be able to deadlift 200 pounds, and it's within your capability as, the strength of those muscles that you have, even though they've atrophied, you haven't used them. Over time, you can get to that 200, but it's going to be a gradual progression. And you may find that after the accident and you've gone through rehabilitation, either physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, you're now stronger than you ever were. You now can metaphorically lift a lot more than you ever could before.
Mm-hmm. What are some suggestions you might have for maybe those who are working at home and they have kids and the kids aren't quite in school yet, and all the other things that are happening in one's life? How can they incorporate some recovery into their lives, something, an action that they could take?
So it's an interesting question, Rob, and we spend a lot of time trying to understand that. So what is recovery physically? Recovery physically, first of all, begins if you're in a tough time. The body loves rhythm. And storms tend to disrupt rhythm.
Mm.
It is now you need to have habits that you follow routinely, and then your body says, okay, we're going to get through this. We know what to do. So let's say you normally get up and make your bed. Then you have, maybe you have some spiritual rituals. Maybe you do a meditation for 15 minutes before you get up. Then you have a really nice breakfast. Maybe you write a gratitude list for yourself for like 1 minute, all the things you can be grateful for. And you hydrate properly throughout the day. You try to get some exercise normally at some point during the day as a normal routine. And all these routines that you have that have been acquired over maybe several years, those are the most important routines that you follow during cycles of big stress. The body needs routine. It loves routine. It loves habits. What happens when people get into these storms, they forget all that stuff and they just don't do it. And something as simple as making your bed or as brushing your teeth and getting up and dressing perfectly, even though you don't go anywhere today, you get up and you do exactly the same things because your body says, I understand this. This is something we can deal with. And one of the best ways to rid yourself of anxiety is to get physical. So working out maybe 2 or 3 times a day, not really intensely, but because you're carrying so much more stress, getting your heart rate up, getting those muscles to discharge can be extremely helpful.
Mm.
And then emotionally, you need to do anything that creates somehow a very brief moment, perhaps, in the storm of positivity, of hope, of any positive emotions are healing. So you can do anything you can, watch movies that make you laugh or bring back a lot of positive emotionality that give you a sense of peace and optimism that we're going to get through this. Listen to other people's voices, listen to tapes, play music that actually lifts your spirit and gives you this sense of optimism that we're going to get through this. And be around people who tend to be optimistic as much as possible. Those are healing people. You don't want to go around a lot of people who are negative and pessimistic. All it does is degrade and add the stress emotionally to you. Mm-hmm. And then mentally, you want to make sure that you're constantly working on this inner voice that you have in your head that is actually your coach and help coach you through this in positive ways. The stories you tell yourself, the language you use to others, what you're focusing your energy on, and to be able to take breaks from time to time throughout the day and just allow your brain to kind of recharge and not stay on the things that have actually causing so much pain and discomfort. Find whether it is prayer, whether it is anything that you do that changes the neurological channel, allows for restoration. And spiritually, it's a really big one. To reconnect with your purpose. Why should you fight? Why am I here? What am I trying to teach all those around me? I'm leading at home with my family. I'm leading at work. I'm leading in my community. I don't want to be a source of stress for them. I want to be a realistic source of hope and inspiration. So you recognize that we don't need leaders when everything is going well. But when the storm descends, that's when we need people to stand up and say, listen, there is a way we can get through this. Yes, it is tough for all of us here, very tough for my children, but I'm going to actually get them to be involved in all the routines that we had before. And maybe they can't go to school, but we're going to have a routine that's very close to that at home because their bodies need that. And they need connection to other kids. So they may be allowed to be on screen time or even gaming with other kids and on the telephone because they need social connection. And that's part of their healing and their routine that they are missing. So stress and recovery, the balance is what really is so crucial here. And our bodies love a routine.
Mm-hmm. These days, and you mentioned just a few moments ago, the importance of purpose. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on the importance of purpose and also the difference between a personal credo, which you write about in your book, and purpose.
So, purpose is the reason we get up in the morning. We have to have a why. Human beings are what I learned through all my work is that we are conservation of energy crazy. We don't want to expend energy, and we have to have a good reason for doing it. If we could just sit around and do nothing, we would do nothing. And that comes from our ancestors. Who we are is who we were. Our ancestors, when food and shelter and everything was scarce, nobody was running around wasting a lot of energy. They only used and expended energy on those things that would help survival and help their families survive. And then the rest of the time, they were conserving energy and thinking about what should I be spending my energy on to make sure that I'm not wasting it. And those who didn't do that didn't survive. So we are part of that, that powerful ethos. And so today we have to have a reason for expending energy. But it's so interesting because we don't have a shortage of food and water and shelter, but we're still acting as if we would rather do nothing than do something in our life. We feel like our ultimate would be sitting on the deck, sipping a martini and watching all the crazy people go by, and that would be nirvana. That would be heaven. And the fact is, it's exactly the opposite. What we learned is that we actually get a lot of joy out of expending energy if we can override the impulse to be energy conservative. But we have to have a good reason. And so that's what purpose is. So we start with, what is the purpose for you being alive? Why are you even here? What does life mean to you? You won this lottery of life through no effort of your own. What the heck does it mean to you? What are you supposed to do with this gift of life? Are you just to conserve energy until the end? Or is it just about seeking out pleasure and nothing else? Well, when people get into that, and that's what the journaling really is all about, is getting people to think about what is the ultimate mission of your life. For you to succeed as a human being, you have to complete that mission. And how does it relate to just getting up and clean, just brushing your teeth and having a good breakfast? And why should you do all those things? The greatest chaos in our life is if we have no reason for living. We don't have a purpose for doing anything. Chaos reigns. The organizing principle is purpose, but we have to get the purpose right. And what we found is the most powerful purpose is what we call a self-transcending purpose, a purpose that is not so much about me. I'll do almost anything if I think it will help those that I care about, because that's part of my mission. And so I'll go through all kinds of antics. I'll put up with things. I'll be more patient. I'll be more forgiving. I'll be more resilient, because it's for a higher purpose. And if I don't have that purpose, then life is a struggle. Viktor Frankl, this brilliant psychiatrist who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, he said, pain is necessary in life. Suffering is optional. Suffering is pain without a purpose. And it's like, if you have a reason for suffering, if you have a reason for putting yourself through this pandemic, it somehow changes the whole thing for you. It gives you a perspective that, I can lead in this pandemic with all my family, with everyone I care about, and I actually can make a difference in their lives. So I'm not going to be this little complaining, little ornery, irritated, impatient, victim during this difficult time. But I'm on a mission, and I'm going to find real answers, and I'm going to help others. So the contribution that purpose plays in one's credo, the credo is really the ultimate statement of what you want to use for making all your ethical and moral decisions, your decisions about how to treat others. And it's a 150-day journey for 10 minutes a day in a journal that you write. It's a scripted journal. And it's quite a process. It's not for the faint of heart. And I hope that your listeners, that there'll be some or most will take it on, because it helps you define really consciously and intentionally, the source code that you're going to use going forward for deciding what I should and shouldn't do. Most of us have no idea what we're referencing when we decide, yes, I should or shouldn't do. This whole program and that book, Leading with Character, and its accompanying journal, is to clarify that in the most explicit and definitive, intentional way possible, so that every decision you make that has a moral and ethical implication, you vet it through that lens. And at the core of that is your purpose. Your purpose, your core values, all the things that matter most to you in life, the people and the causes that actually represent what you believe you are here for. And then that becomes the centerpiece of your personal credo and the centerpiece of your life story. And together, those give you a true north for navigating through the most difficult times that you may ever face, and to get through it and actually find yourself stronger at the end rather than being broken.
Mm-hmm. Why is journaling so powerful?
That's a great question. So at the Institute, we studied everything, try to figure out how do we get people to change their thinking on things, their mindset. How do we get them to actually change this private voice that's inside their head if it's very dysfunctional? How do they invest energy in ways that will get them to take a path that they know is not in their best interest, but they keep taking it? And we did everything we could. We used visualization, we used audio tapes, we used videotapes, we did everything. And what we found was the stickiest, the one that had the most direct connection to this executive function in our brain, how we actually think and process information, was cursive writing. And that was a big breakthrough in our thinking. James Pennebaker was one of the most, really front thinkers in this area. We followed his work and many others. But it became the centerpiece. That's why you have a whole journal. In all of our athletes, we took 17 people to #1 in the world in their sports. And all of them journal, and all of them will tell you this enormous impact. If you need to change the way your brain is working, the way you change those neurological pathways and the networks that they're feeding, is to actually send energy in new directions. And you do that best with your hand. It's actually better than on a keyboard. So I really believe there's great value in it. And if you'll stay with this program for 150 days, 10 minutes a day, you'll be hooked for sure.
What is the magic of that 10-minute period? In other words, why not 5? Why not 20? And does your writing need to be legible?
Legible to you, because you're going to be reading it multiple times, back and forth, and going back and looking at it. 10 minutes is, we used 5 minutes we tested this for 10 years, and we had people from all over the world do the work. 5 minutes was not enough time for people. 7 minutes was not enough time. 10 minutes was about right. Even though they often, if they had the time, they would go over. Some of the exercises actually seem to take you further. And if I ask you to put 30 minutes into it, people go, I don't have 30 minutes for anything. I don't even know when I'm going to get 10 minutes, but I might try 10 minutes. So it was a negotiation, and most people said they couldn't get enough out that they felt was important enough and really made the difference in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Once they've gone through the workbook, do you encourage continuing to journal on a daily basis?
So your personal credo, every corporation has an organizational credo. Most people have never thought about developing a personal credo. So it's kind of a new idea for most people. And this is an evolutionary document. It's never going to be finished. Every decade, every year, maybe every month, you'll get new insights about what life is for you and what are the things that truly have value, because you're always making priority decisions in terms of what should get this energy investment. For me, energy is the resource that makes everything happen. And it is how, you change the directions in your life. You have to start with energy changes in how you think, energy changes in what you do, energy changes that affect changes in you emotionally and even spiritually. So it's a document that's never finished. And, you start 150 days. I'm on my third. I'm doing it for the third time.
Right.
And I'm going to do it until I die, because when I go back and I realize how much ground I've covered and where I am now, I'm a different person, but this is what I want with the time I have left.
I'd like to ask you about truth. You say that once we declare a belief to be unfettered truth, we close the door to introspective inquiry. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is by Mark Twain. And he said, "It ain't what you know that is the problem. It's what you know for certain or for sure that ain't true. That's the problem." So, and that says it pretty clearly that, we're creatures of kind of bias. It's called self-deception. We have identified in the book some 25 ways that are all supported by the research community that we get what we want. We change our view of the real world. We distort it so we can do what we want. We can get away with it. We can and still feel good about ourselves. We use this idea that Dan Arley at Duke said, we keep pushing the envelope, and then we go as far as we can until we start feeling like a bad person, and we don't like that feeling, so we back up, and then we keep pushing the envelope until we can do what we want and still feel like a good person. And that battle is going on all the time in people. And so we have to be very careful about unfettered truth, something that we'll never, ever look at. But it's so interesting. Truth is probably, the word trust and truth begin with THU, and they're wedded together inextricably. And the reason is you can't trust people that don't tell you the truth. And you want that truth to be grounded in the real world as much as possible. And that's one of the number one hallmarks of a great story, is it's grounded in the truth. Even though you don't like it, let's just begin with the reality of what's going on. But if you don't give truth to the world and the people around you, you can no longer be trusted. If you can't trust, imagine, it's the whole basis of how we connect to other people. Our world would become completely chaotic if you can't trust your banker, if you can't trust your grocer, if you can't trust your best friend, if you can't trust your parents, if you can't trust your children. It goes on and on. It's the entire world we live in is based on trust. And it takes years sometime to build, and you can break it literally in an instant. And where it's broken is we're not getting the truth. So we have to hold truth, our truth, as the best that we have right now. This is our sense of the real world. But we're never so arrogant to believe that it is our privilege to have a direct line to absolute reality. Those that have that belief are in serious peril. What you actually know is that the more you know, the less you really know. You're certain that you really don't know that much. So you're always open, you're always curious, you're always listening, and you always have a sense of humility. But when you have an opportunity, you always communicate what for you is truth. And what is built from there is trust. And without trust, we have nothing as human beings.
Mm-hmm. So, and you write a bit about this, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the political climate. And I thought to myself, did politicians ever go through your program? I think it'd be great if they would.
We've had a few folks in Washington go through. But again, it's and this is on both sides of the aisle. There is something that is so it's a very lethal environment. It's so interesting, and it shows you how easily the human system is corruptible. As I said in the book, I try to point out how flawed our human morality system is. And there's no place that's more evident than in Congress. We send our best and our brightest to Congress, and it only takes about 2 years. And all the promises they made to their people become secondary to getting reelected. And they love being called congressman or congresswoman, and they get infatuated with that, and they realize there are money trains that come down from that and privileges they can give their family and kids. And all of a sudden, they're part of this massive network of insider corruption. And they're really not being voices of the public. They're being voices to protect what they have. And this is on both sides of the aisle, and it's, I don't think you can separate them. It's just, I'm a real strong believer in term limits, getting people out of there, getting them in and getting them out, so that you don't build these powerful fiefdoms that you can rule for 20, 30, 40 years, and no one can touch you because you figured out how to play the game. And so what it does is it just points to the vulnerability that we as human beings, if I put most people in that environment, they're going to come apart. A number of researchers have come up with the same conclusion, that only about 10% of the population, 10% can stay above the moral and ethical waterline when they're put into tough situations. 90%, 85% of them are vulnerable and they go back and forth. And then there's 5% at the bottom who don't even try. They're going to get everything they can. But that means 90% of the population doesn't have the ability. If I put you into that situation in Congress, you're going to be part of a very, very decadent culture. And this is what rules the country. And this is true in every country. It's not just true in our country.
Yep.
There's something that is, and that the sad thing is that politics and morality are completely connected. I mean, it's like the policies they are making are all about what's ethically and morally right or wrong. And so you can't separate politics from morality. You just can't do it. So when the people on the inside who are making decisions about what's right or wrong, morally and ethically, have become morally and ethically corrupted in the process, and their decision-making is more about saving them and their party than it is about representing the American voice, the public voice, the voice of the people, we have a serious situation. And that's what's happened in this country and happened around the world in other countries.
I'm just curious on your opinion on this. You've been around a while. I'm 51, so I've been around kind of a while. Does it ever seem like it's been as bad as it is right now, or as concerning?
That's a great question. I think I think the forces have the world has just been changing so rapidly. Almost every day we wake up and something else has happened. We can't keep up with it, and our system, we're trying to adapt, but it's like almost beyond our system's adaptation capability. There's what we call automatic adaptation, and then there is really intentional adaptation. We're trying to adjust in the most constructive way possible, but it's coming at us from so many directions. And when you look at, all the things that we hold dear are becoming questioned. And then you add the pandemic on top of that. People don't even know where to look, and it's very hard to find truth. You don't know where it is. Both parties have their own truth, and a lot of things are censored because they're felt to be not in a healthy, context. But once you start filtering what's good and not good, you don't allow people to make up their own decisions about that, and that also, bodes very badly for where we are going. So I would say people are under more stress now and have to make more adjustments almost daily to keep their sanity. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who are going just over the edge. They just can't take it anymore. Their children are, the second leading cause of death in teenagers 10 to 12 is suicide. Yep. And it's because everything is changing. They don't know where they're going, and they have all the things, all the fun and all the joy is taken out of it. And all they have is one more day of, just, I don't know where we're going. There's just, no one seems to be happy anymore. And so, you're looking for a breath of fresh air. And that's this chapter I'm in my life. I'm trying to figure out how to reach out to youth and help them find their way. And so we're starting this Youth Performance Institute, patterned after the Human Performance Institute, but specifically for youth. There's such a need for it. I feel so badly for what's happening to young people today. It's, it's a tragedy almost beyond description.
Yeah, it is. Talk about the youth program that you're putting together and where somebody could find it.
Well, we're in the construction mode. We're about to develop. It will be a site that people will access. They can access it from anywhere in the world, and it will be exclusively for telling stories of optimism and hope. And we're going to be using kids we believe kids need to mentor other kids. Most important, they listen to other kids more than they listen to adults. So we're using it through the language of those of the same age, and we're letting those kids talk about what they are dealing with and what are some of the positive solutions they've found. And we're pulling together all the assets humanly possible for parents, for coaches, and for kids that they can go to and see what's going on around the world that is actually optimistic and positive. Because there's almost no good news for anyone. It's all terrible news. And you turn on the news and it's just, you almost want to throw up afterwards because there's nothing positive there at all.
True.
And so we're trying to find a medium for kids, and we'll be launching probably in another 3 weeks. We've been working on this for a very long time. And I'm very optimistic that we've got the essential elements, and we'll hopefully make a contribution to kids. And then the people that connect to kids most are parents and coaches, and we'll be dealing with those three populations.
Well, thank you for using this time in your life to create something like that. It's much needed, and I know it will go a long way for many, many people, especially the youth. I wanted to ask you about exercising good judgment, or as you write, prudence. You talk about these three important sources of wisdom: the facts, the heart, and the gut. And can you talk about that and how we can bring those all together?
You know, sometimes people think that the best way to make a decision is just to trust their gut. When you look at the research on that, our gut gets it wrong a lot. I just put it this way: if you're on a, if you're a defendant in a trial and you have a jury, and you don't, you kind of look, as some of the jurists, you just look like you're kind of a tough guy. And when you walk in the courtroom, they say their gut just says, "Oh, this, I don't even know what the deal is, but I think this guy's guilty," because their gut tells them just by the way you look or present yourself. Do you want them to render the verdict before you even have a chance to tell your story? Because their gut said, I think this guy must be guilty. So our guts are instant, and there are years and years of data collecting that gives us that. We don't know how the process is actually, moving forward, but it is a source of information. Mm-hmm. Sometimes your gut is right, and sometimes you just trust your gut, and it turned out to be 100% right. But we've learned there's a better way. So the first thing you do is you anchor yourself in the real world. What are the facts? What's truth? Let's just get all that, and let's don't get biased just with the facts you like. Let's hear the whole story. Don't come up with a half story. I want you to look at the facts on both sides. Even though you're biased, I'd rather go this way. Look at it openly and look at both sides. And then let's just, what we call this empathy circuit. Let's just see, what does your heart say here? It's another source of remarkable wisdom. It's the compassion, the kindness. It's a connection to others, and there is wisdom there. Just like there is great wisdom in facts, there's great wisdom in touching the part of you that actually cares about other human beings deeply. And you want to get that right for all kinds of reasons. And then check with your gut. Check with your gut last. And then when you actually vet all three of those very honestly and very carefully, render a decision and then act on it. But it's a process that actually can prevent you from just making stupid, irrational, instinctive responses that may in fact get you into serious trouble. You didn't think about it. That's what we get from so many executives. They said, I never really thought about it. I don't know how I got here, but I never really thought, I should have thought about it much more carefully. I just kind of thought I could get away with it. I never really thought about the implications. Well, that's why I have that formula. And it kind of raises another issue that for me is very important. There is, for all of us, this thing we call our best self. And that is the person that shows up occasionally. It's not fantasy. It's actually a reality. That occasionally you present the world with the best version of you possible. And when you step into that space, it's like you're most proud of yourself when you're here, particularly if it's in a stressful moment. This is where you want to access. This is a special place between your ears. It's a very magical place that actually is the seat of wisdom. It's the seat of, you following the dictates of your values, your sense of purpose, your personal credo. And so when we arm that best self with the right documents, with all of this writing that I'm hoping your listeners will be involved in, something kind of magical happens with that best self. It becomes metaphorically your Yoda. And Yoda's on one side and Darth Vader's on the other side. And this is always the battle between greed and compassion or goodness. And this is the story of mankind. This was George Lucas and Joseph Campbell's conclusion. And so before you make a tough decision, consult your Yoda. consult this little one, and we've worked with this for years, and this little extraordinary source of wisdom that maybe sits on your shoulder, and you say, is that the best I've got? No. What does my best self say here? Almost instantly you come up with a different conclusion. Is this my best moral self? Is this my best emotional self? Even when is this my best physical self? Do I want to pout? Do I want to go around and just look like a defeated or whatever? And we learned a lot of these lessons in the world of professional sport, because it all helps us come to terms with how do we raise the bar and really make the right decisions and be proud of what we're doing because we've actually done the best we could in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what your best self is. And that's why we're very encouraging around how you make decisions. Check with your Yoda, who you have equipped with some really important true north documents.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Back to those three sources of wisdom. If I could use an example, let's say as a business person, the facts line up that a deal is going to be very successful and make you or the company a lot of money. Let's say the gut saying, I've been here before, and yes, this is going to be a home run, a slam dunk. But something in your heart is saying, I don't know, it doesn't feel quite, right. That compassion isn't there. Some of those other emotions that you talked about. Do all three need to align?
You have to come to some kind of conciliation. You have to find a way to, get these voices to actually agree. So let's say you're a CEO and the company's in trouble because of the pandemic. And both your logical mind, after you looked at all the facts, and your intuitive instincts say, if you don't do this, we're going to lose the company. But the idea of furloughing 80,000 people and putting them out of work, and the harm that's going to do to their lives and the sadness and everything else, you're not going to sleep well at night. You're going to have to vet this very carefully. So the compassionate side of you says there's got to be a way to do this where maybe we don't have to let go 80,000. Maybe we can do it at 40,000. And we can, those 40,000 that have to be let go, maybe we can give them a pretty good package and do everything we can to help them find other work. And you address all of those people and try to show them that, that you actually, if there was any other way, we have to save the company. If there was any other way to do this, we can't really take on more debt. We're already up to our eyebrows in debt. But we're going to save as many as we can. And I was going to have to let go 80,000, but I'm going to drop it to 40. And all the executives in this company are going to take a significant pay cut so that we can, in fact, I remember at HPI, we ran into a really tough thing. And we had to make a decision whether or not to lay people off or take a significant pay cut. Anyone who had a salary above a certain point, mm-hmm. all the leaders. And I made the decision that we were not going to let a single person go. This was the 2006, 2007 mm-hmm. when everything crashed. And we got through it. And the loyalty that created once we got back on track, and we were able actually to made up a lot of that. We were a very profitable company. We were able to pay back a lot of that money that they didn't get. And we paid it in the form of bonuses, and not to the executives, but to the rank and file. Mm. So I really feel like if you're going to be a capitalist, which I am, it should be capitalism with a heart. You can't just make a decision based on what the numbers tell you. you have to, capitalism should have a soul, and you should be able to try to do everything you can to be, to honor the unbelievably powerful position you're in, where you can either destroy people where they lose their homes, their families, their kids' education. You have to find a way to make sure that if that has to happen and there's no other way, there's still a way to show compassion in doing it and how you let people go.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what is sometimes referred to as conscious capitalism, or, capitalism with a sense, really direct sense, to the impact you're having on other human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to see there's different organizations in the business community now, like Conscious Capitalism is one, the Tugboat Institute and Small Giants are two others that are excellent, and that my company, Image One, is a part of. And I think you say it best with it. It's a humbling, and it truly is an honor to be able to lead folks. And we need to take that very seriously in the way we go about doing that. I wanted to ask you about optimism. And I'm working on this one myself. I'm a hedger. So I'm optimistic, but then I always say, if I'm communicating it out loud or in my head, my inner voice, I'm always saying, yeah, but if this, or, this could happen, or I can't control that, so this might happen. And I'm just curious about what one like myself could do to strengthen that muscle.
So, I can tell you this, without optimism or hope, everything is gone. We have to have hope and optimism for the future, or we can't go forward. You take that and all we have left is despair. So we have to have a pretty strong muscle, but we have to balance it. I love the term realistic optimism, or optimism with a realistic tint to it. That you're not just a pie in the sky, just out there with rose-colored glasses and never see the real hazards that exist out there. But what I really think is important is that you become aware of all that, and then you choose an optimistic path, because without that, we have nothing. And that's what leaders have to do. And you keep changing your, maybe your tactics and strategy, and finding ways to maneuver through the minefields and boulder fields and avalanches and everything that are occurring everywhere. But if you don't have a sense inside of you that we can find our way, that there is a way through this, and you're leading, first of all, you're leading yourself, and then you're leading all these other people, they will pick it up in a nanosecond. And that's probably one of the most important things you lead with, is that I know these are tough times, but we will, and I will guarantee you, we'll be stronger on the other side of this. It may take a while, but I need to have you believe in our mission. And if you have ideas about how we can do this, I'm open to them. But we need to, the biggest issue is that you face the entire picture, including all of the obstacles and downside and risks. If you don't have that, you have a distorted picture. You don't have reality. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's la land. But now, if you can do that, and then carve intentionally out a path of realistic optimism, and you communicate that, and you feed that muscle as though it were your survival muscle, because it is. Once you give up and there's no more hope, the game is over. You're not going to be investing energy in anything, and all we have is chaos. So that muscle is built just like you build your bicep and tricep. You invest energy in it. And if you want to have a great bicep, you have to consistently invest energy in it. And you do that with the muscle of optimism by, maybe at the end of the day, you list all the positive things that happen to you, and the things that actually could be used to feed this realistic optimism. That there are things that are happening that actually have a trajectory to them that could be really positive. They may not always turn out, but you don't have your head in a dark closet where your head in the sand and just telling everybody it's all going to work out. You see the entire spectrum, and you're going to lead people through the storm. And that's why you're there. That's what leaders need to do. And so you have to feed that optimism muscle every day, or it will atrophy. And all of a sudden, you're part of the problem now. Now you have this cynicism and sarcasm. And there's so much reason to do that, and impatience. And you go around and you give people angst because they can feel in you your anxiety, your nervousness, your hesitation about where we're going. And you're not building confidence in them. You're building a sense that, hey, we're in a situation and we're going to panic. We got to panic because there's no way out. And the leader, a great leader, will do that. So it's a great question. And I think it's at the core of leadership.
Thank you for that. Well, I'd like to end with a quote. Actually, it's from the introduction of your book, Leading with Character. And you say, 3 facts are immutable. You were born, you will die, and between your birth and death is an opportunity for impact. And I thank you for that. And this book that you wrote with the accompanying workbook is hugely valuable. And I'm encouraging everybody to pick it up and go through the exercise. You will not be disappointed. So, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
I was excited. I enjoyed our time together, and I really hope we maybe had a chance to give some important new thoughts, and looking into things that maybe they hadn't really thought about that much. That's what I love to do. I love to get people to explore new things. So thanks for the opportunity.
I do. I think you opened up those windows for people. And to all the loyal listeners, I greatly appreciate you spending time with us today. And as always, I wish you all much love and gratitude.